On a lonely rural highway in northern New Hampshire, a couple reportedly has a close encounter with something not of this earth. Betty and Barney Hill believe they are being followed along Route 3 by what initially looks like a moving star. They stop the car and realize that the light is actually a disc-shaped craft. At 10:15 p.m., everything suddenly goes black. The Hills believe that at that moment, they were abducted.
Betty and Barney Hill case stirred up a whole new range of interest in alien abductions.
I'd seen several UFOs I'd been experimented on.
Why would a guy in a small town start talking about his abduction experience unless he really, really believed it happened to him?
People were taken aboard spacecraft by extraterrestrials.
The stain has something to do with the abduction event.
They were biologically related.
Armed with brand new leads and physical evidence never before seen, the team examines the phenomenon of alien abduction.
This is the key case with the best evidence in all the abduction scenarios around.
And gets a first-hand exclusive look at a surgery to remove a supposed alien implant.
I don't have any reason why that could be there.
Which is then subjected to exhaustive laboratory analysis.
We actually detected radio frequency.
The object is moving on its own.
It's just freaky.
Alien abductions, psychological phenomenon.
You would like to think he's been abducted, but that this whole thing may be an amazing put-on.
Or reality.
Skeptics who just don't know what you're talking about.
The team from UFO magazine opens case number 61203, Abductions.
Why is it that people think of that image whenever they hear the word aliens? You know, the big eyes and the big head. I mean, how do we even know what aliens really look like?
That was an idealization of the image that Betty and Barney Hill first talked about when they drew that image after their abduction in 1961 in New Hampshire. And that began the whole ball of wax in the United States of America. When you look at the 1950s, that golden age of UFO contact, they all call themselves contactees. But in the Betty and Barney Hill case, contactees become abductees.
September 19th, 1961. Betty and Barney Hill are returning from a vacation in Canada, driving south on Route 3 near Franconia Notch, New Hampshire.
I kept driving and driving and driving.
As they recount, around midnight, an abnormally bright star catches their eye. The Hills are puzzled at first.
Saw it as it swung around to the rear of my car.
And then became terrified.
It is there, it's right above us, Betty. Look.
They realize the light in the sky seems to be following them.
I was hurrying to get away.
What they first believed to be nothing more than a bright star becomes to Barney's eyes a hovering craft 80 feet wide with a double row of windows.
And I made a turn.
The disc reportedly follows them, flying directly over the car.
And I don't know why I had to make that turn. And I was lost.
And suddenly, all the Hills remember next is continuing their drive south on Route 3. To their astonishment, they've somehow lost hours of time.
Even though they consciously remembered aspects of the entire incident, they didn't remember what happened in the missing time they experienced between the time they saw the spaceship and the time they were in their car driving back to their house.
As will later be recounted in the best-selling book Interrupted Journey, which introduced the Hills case to the world. Under hypnosis, they both reportedly remembered struggling against small figures or humanoids. They assert that the aliens appeared to regard the Hills as laboratory specimens. One of the most important aspects of the Hills case is their claim that their abduction left behind physical evidence.
Guys, if you can get up to New Hampshire, we could reopen this case, and if you can get any evidence out of it, I know just the laboratories to analyze it.
All of you do your respective jobs. Let's pack our bags and get off to New Hampshire.
The team is in northern New Hampshire to trace the route the Hills took that night.
You can't study UFOs without seriously pondering the possibility that they will interact with us and therefore can't expunge the abduction phenomenon.
We're going to meet Kathy Marden, who was Betty's niece, who was alive at the time of the abduction, and she was actually a witness to what happened to Betty and Barney Hill that night.
Kathy Marden was 13 when she first became aware of the Hills abduction story. Following Barney's death on February 25, 1969, Betty grew closer to Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
And confided private details about her ordeal. Betty's death in 2004 left Kathy the greatest authority on the subject. Her book provides new insight into the case.
We are heading toward the first encounter, correct?
That's correct. The first location where Betty and Barney actually stopped the car and got out with their binoculars to take a look at this craft.
According to Kathy, there were 3 different locations where the Hills spotted the alleged craft as they traveled down Route 3. First, at the Mount Cleveland picnic area, 17 miles south of Lancaster. Second, near Cannon Mountain. And finally, at a lake 1 mile south of Indian Head, where they stopped the car and were reportedly abducted.
This is the spot, the Mount Cleveland picnic area. This was the first stop that Betty and Barney made. Betty's eyes were drawn to a new light in the sky. Betty took the binoculars first. Betty looked at the moon.
Okay.
And as she was looking, she saw an odd-shaped craft. It was flashing multicolored points of light as it traveled across the face of the moon. It just immediately swooped down and no sound. That was the perplexing thing. She, at that point, saw the object shaped. It appeared to be rotating, flashing blue-white light, moving in a stair-step pattern, and it seemed to be bouncing around in the sky. By that time, the craft had moved northwest toward Vermont as it passed over the Cannon Mountain aerial tramway.
Barney begins driving again, racing to the safety of the nearest town. But the craft continued to track the car.
The craft shifted ahead, stopped, and descended to within about 100 feet of their vehicle, causing Barney to stop the car in the middle of the highway. He looked up at the craft, and there were approximately 8 to 11 figures in the window looking down at Barney. Barney wanted to get away from there and fast.
I was hurrying to get away, and I kept driving and driving and driving, and I made a turn.
Barney made a left-hand turn onto a dirt road. But there were about 6 to 8 men in the road, and they were confused. What are these men doing in the road? They really had no idea until the men divided into 2 groups and started to approach the car that they weren't human.
It is here that things took a violent turn.
The men opened the door and took her out. They dragged Barney through the woods to where this craft was waiting.
The Hills' alleged abduction site was nothing but open countryside and forest in 1961.
This was the key moment in which they seem to have crossed from frightened travelers along a dark road at night to actual abductees and subjects of creatures from another planet. They were brought here from the road.
That's correct.
And then taken aboard the ship here.
Under hypnosis, they both revealed that they were taken up a ramp. Betty engaged in a struggle with these men, and this is where her dress was torn. Betty was taken on board the craft. Barney was taken to a room ahead of her.
At which point, they were subjected to various sets of medical experiments.
Medical experiments and specimens were taken from their bodies.
According to her account, Betty asked the alien entity where it came from, and was shown a three-dimensional map of stars connected by a variety of lines. Incredibly, during a hypnosis session over 6 months later, Betty was able to accurately recreate this star map. After the experiments were complete, the Hills alleged they were led back to the car.
Barney was taken down a path to the vehicle. Betty was escorted by the leader down to the vehicle and watched the craft leave.
I was unaware myself of how much they remembered without any kind of aid by a psychiatrist, regression or hypnosis.
In the early morning hours after the incident, September 20th, 1961, the Hills returned home. They knew something had happened, but they could not account for the 2 missing hours. Later that day, Betty noticed something unusual on the dress she wore the previous night. An unknown pink powder coated the dress, even though she had no memory yet of being abducted and no recollection of coming in contact with the pink powder. Something compelled her to hang the dress in the closet without having it cleaned.
No one bothered to even do any testing in 1961 on any of the evidence. Nobody took a look at Betty's dress in 1961, that dress that was torn at the zipper.
Now this case, as opposed to almost all other abduction cases, actually has some physical evidence that we can look at.
Will analysis of the mysterious pink powder that coated Betty Hill's dress prove conclusively that the Hills were abducted by an alien craft?
This is the seminal key case with the best evidence in all the abduction scenarios around.
The team analyzes a 4-inch by 2-inch sample of the dress to see if traces of pink powder remain.
Skeptics, you just don't know what you're talking about.
The Hills abduction entered popular culture first through the 1966 book, Interrupted Journey. The book became a bestseller when Look magazine serialized the story in its October 4th and 18th issues that same year.
As he stared downward, he seemed very impersonal, and I suddenly felt like a tiny bug waiting to be snatched, like I was some sort of specimen, and it was the eeriest feeling.
In 1975, the book was made into The UFO Incident, a television movie starring James Earl Jones.
Coming closer.
It is not. It is not coming closer. Just way up there. Betty, what are you trying to make me believe?
What are our criteria for alien abduction?
According to the people who study this, the abductee has to be taken against his or her will. 2, the aliens have to transport the abductee somewhere, usually to a quote-unquote mothership. Finally, the person is returned to wherever the person has experienced some missing time, like Betty and Barney Hill.
To me, the problem is you get various people making these claims that they've been abducted, and the media tends to pick up on these things. And then it publishes this, which sort of propagates the myth of what the little green men should look like and what the saucers should look like. People read that, and people have their own experiences, and they tend to fit it to that, and it seems to be kind of a vicious cycle that propagates the myth.
Although thousands of UFO abductions have been reported, the vast majority of cases have been dismissed as bogus. But the Betty and Barney Hill case has, to this day, remained an open mystery. According to the team, there is something quite different about this case. Real physical evidence was left behind.
There were highly polished spots on the trunk of the vehicle.
There were large, shiny spots on the trunk of the car.
About the size of silver dollars.
Fortunately, we also had a neighbor who was a physicist, and he recommended that Betty take a compass out around the car to see how the needle of the compass would react.
Just got the compass anywhere near them. The compass kept spinning around and around and around.
You would place the compass anywhere other than on the spots. It would just flop down.
Betty Hill's story is that there was some sort of physical scuffle during the course of the episode. So then you ask the question, well, what does the dress look like? The dress is physically damaged. The zipper is torn off. Some of the fabric is actually dislocated. There are contaminants on the fabric, stains all over.
If extraterrestrials left something on her fabric, would that still show up?
It's been 40 years, so there will be a certain amount of deterioration or decay of any samples that are on there.
The substance involved is a powdery pink substance on Betty's dress.
What could it be? Is it an actual substance excreted by an alien? Was it something that was on the ship that she rubbed against?
Could be proteins or enzymes.
And how would you know if something is extraterrestrial?
We're just looking for anomalies.
Betty Hill's niece has agreed to turn over 2 samples of the dress to the team for testing, a control sample and a contaminated sample. Dr. Ted Ackworth brings the samples to Phyllis Budinger, a highly respected chemical analyst with decades of experience with British Petroleum. She analyzes the dress, looking for any trace of the mysterious pink powder and any other anomalies in the fabric.
What do we have here?
A clipping from the left sleeve of Betty's dress, and this is the control. It retains the original color of the dress.
The hypothesis is that the stain is something to do with the abduction event.
Yes, the dress material was stained. There's very, very little of this material on the control sample. So this tells me that whatever's on there came from an external source. It absolutely did not come from Betty.
Potentially having some sort of residual material or...
It might be.
First, she looked at it under a microscope to get a high magnification view of it.
You're going to see that compared to the control, the stain swath has a less ordered weave and there's more spaces between the knit rows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see the greater spacing between the knit rows.
Yeah,
on
and
the contaminated
if you look closely, it's been disturbed.
Through microscopic analysis, Phyllis has detected areas of unusual strain and distress in the fabric of Betty's dress.
The fabric clearly is mechanically dislocated compared to the control sample. Everything that I see is consistent with an explanation of there being a physical struggle between the wearer of the dress and someone else.
Could this be evidence of Betty Hill's claim that she struggled against the alleged abductors in her attempt to escape?
Why don't we move on to the spectroscopic analysis? That sounded pretty interesting too.
Infrared is a very, very powerful technique. It's used for molecular structure identification. Right. Each infrared spectrum of a molecule is unique.
In spectrum analysis, a beam of infrared light goes through each molecule and produces a unique wavelength that acts like a chemical fingerprint. To get an accurate identification of the dress's contaminants, Phyllis extracts some of the unknown residue from the sample.
And these are the results, and what it does is enhances the bands.
It looks like there are at least 2 kinds of contaminants on the fabric. One is a protein-based material, the other is a fat material. Both are common, you find them everywhere. So we found that the dress is contaminated, and those contaminants are common. We got a better sense of exactly what the contaminant was on the fabric.
I can't tell whether they were human or not, but they were biologically probably related.
The physical evidence is consistent with the story, but it does not say that something or someone else was an alien or a human or anything else. So it's inconclusive.
But there's one final twist to the Betty and Barney Hill case, one that to this day remains unexplained.
What about the star map that Betty Hill drew? When she was regressed, she drew a star map of where the alien on the spacecraft told her they were from. In fact, he actually showed her a diagram in space of where they were from. Marjorie Fish, 8 years later, was able to show that there were stars in that Zeta Reticuli system, that twin star system that Betty said existed.
Zeta Reticuli is a star system centered around 2 main stars approximately 39 light years away from Earth. Astronomers did not map this system until 1972. While Betty Hill's star map from the late 60s closely matched the newly mapped star cluster, Betty's diagram showed 3 stars too many.
The map didn't even match.
But in 1972, when we had the technology to see that sector of space, what did we find out? The exact same 3 stars that Betty Hill said were there, and it became an exact match.
Really?
How could Betty Hill have identified the exact location of that star system and the exact configuration of those stars. She identified it, she drew it, she diagrammed it before we even had the technology.
Since Betty Hill reported being abducted and subjected to an invasive medical examination, thousands more have reported undergoing the same ordeal. But a new twist to the abduction phenomenon has been uncovered in recent years. Abductees around the world have been discovering alien devices implanted in their bodies. This may be actual video of an alien implant inside a human body.
The object is moving on its own.
It's just freaky.
Disturbing and invasive medical procedures have always been associated with reports of alien abduction. But in recent years, dozens of abductees have come forward with something else. They have told UFO researchers that their abduction memories have been followed by the discovery of unknown objects embedded in their flesh. The team interviews Tim Cullen of Yuma, Colorado. Colorado has long been a hotbed of UFO activity, according to researchers. On August 27, 1995, 21 witnesses in 13 locations around central Colorado reportedly see a massive cigar-shaped object performing incredible maneuvers. These sightings continue over the next 48 hours, making it one of the most important mass sightings in recent U.S. history. One witness actually captured this object on tape.
Thank you.
Tim has had several close sightings of a UFO and subsequently discovered a strange object implanted in his body.
It began in May of 1978. I was driving home, coming home from Denver with my wife, and we were coming up Highway 59, and a UFO came down in front of us on the road. It was about 100 foot long, 20 foot wide, 10 foot high.
Tim spotted the object on Highway 59, 12 miles outside of Yuma.
The craft moved out here into this pasture, and I think it landed approximately out here in this area right here. And all of a sudden, just two lights come on, one right above the other, real bright. And it seemed like we sat there 4 or 5 minutes. And turned back to my wife and said, well, we might as well go to town. Then 4 years later, I found this piece of metal in my arm.
There is no wound that would mark a point of entry, and Cullen had MRI scans prior to the UFO sighting, which proved that there was no metal in his arm at that time.
So here it is. Here's the object. Looks like a couple of inches up from your wrist.
The team consults with Dr. Roger Lear, a California-based surgeon. Dr. Lear has facilitated the removal of over a dozen objects from individuals who claim they had alien implants. Most of those alleged implants were never tested. Of those that were, all were found to be either of earthly origin or the tests were inconclusive.
Is there any way this could be just a biological secretion of some sort, some deposit, a fatty
Absolutely
deposit?
not, because the metals that are in this object are not secreted by the body. They're all foreign to the body.
And you would say that if an object that size entered externally, there'd be a discernible entry wound.
There's going to be some portal of entry. And we looked at his arm. There was no scar whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I think is I'm getting a professional opinion of a medical doctor who's telling me that this is an anomalous object and that he's had 3 labs look at it, and all 3 of the labs said that this is a very unusual object. My main concern is that this is just a piece of metal that somehow got into Jim's body.
Further, the object triggered no rejection or inflammatory reaction in Tim's body. In fact, upon removal, it was discovered that Tim's body had surrounded the implant with a large bundle of nerves, a highly anomalous reaction in response to the presence of foreign material.
So you say there was tissue around this thing. Can we see the video?
Sure.
The object also displayed abnormal behaviors during its surgical removal. The entire event was caught on tape.
This is the video of the operation.
Look at the size of that pad, you see? Object,
Yeah,
there
now,
it is.
here it
Now look
is.
how it's moving away. See, there's your proof. Pat, you see that? The object is moving on its own. The tool isn't pushing
look at it.
It's moving inside Tim's arm.
I can't be 100% convinced until we get a super close-up of this thing and there's just something completely bizarre in there that will blow me away and make me say, you know, this is an alien object.
You don't know what it is, so we'll see.
We can see it moving around on the screen.
I'm not actually.
Now I paused it. You see, it's not actually touching it, right? It's away. So let's play it again.
Okay.
You see that it jumped again?
It jumped again. It's jumping.
Look how it's moving away.
Hey, are you rolling now?
Look.
That's interesting.
Look
but
at that.
He's trying to. Well, that's pretty bizarre.
It's moving on its own. What's making it move? It certainly isn't being touched by the hemostat. It's certainly being touched by anything else. There's no fluid there. You can't see anything fluid in the arm. It's simply moving through the tissue under its own power.
I mean, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think. If it's not fluid, then this thing is moving around by itself. Then I don't know what to think. It's just freaky.
While the team finds Tim Cullen's evidence to be remarkable, there are even more recent and troubling cases of implants left behind after possible alien abductions. December 11th, 2007. A 49-year-old Pennsylvania man, Jeff Harvey, contacts the team.
You know what? Let's get back to the office. Come on.
In 2001, he became seriously ill with what was diagnosed as heavy metal poisoning.
Hop in.
The cause of the poisoning was never determined. At the same time, he discovered something strange buried in his upper thigh.
When did you first realize you had an object or something inside you?
But what happened was I started losing a lot of weight. I used to weigh 220 pounds. I weigh 140 pounds now. So I was losing tons of weight. I became extremely ill. If this is related to that, I want it out, A, and B, I want this thing analyzed 8 ways to Sunday to find out what the answer is.
Well, what makes you think that this is UFO related?
It's one of the possibilities I'm researching.
When Jeff was 8 years old in 1967, both he and his father had witnessed a UFO sighting while living in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, near Scranton.
My dad and I were standing on the banks of the Lackawaxen River fishing, and at treetop level, it came across. It was smoking from the back. It had a circular shape. It had a bit of a bowl to the bottom.
Did you have any memory at all of when you sensed that nodule in your leg being put in?
That's the oddest part about it. The VA said, consistent with shrapnel, never been in battle. So I don't have any reason why that could be there.
But you do have experience with having a UFO sighting. Maybe that's the connection.
When the team has the alleged implant surgically removed and analyzed, to their surprise,
we actually detected radio frequency.
the team takes Jeff to Dr. Lear's medical examination room in Thousand Oaks, California, for pre-surgery testing on the alleged alien implant.
Look for some radioactivity, electromagnetic fields, and things of that nature. So come on right on in.
Very good.
Jeff Harvey noticed a foreign magnetic object in his leg 4 years ago.
When I noticed it, I thought, I'd really like to find out what the heck this is. So I talked to the doctors down at the VA. They said, oh, fatty cyst, don't worry about it, no big deal. And then for some reason, one day I thought, you know what? I wonder if it's metal. So I stuck a magnet on it, and it pulled right up out of the skin, and I said, all right, hold on. There's no fatty cyst that's magnetic.
Jeff, come on in.
Only after the object has been surgically removed can the team determine scientifically what this object is and its origin.
That's the main bone, and then here is your object.
The unknown object feels like a small pellet, slightly bigger than a BB, buried 3 to 4 millimeters under the skin of Jeff's upper right thigh.
Size-wise, this is something very similar to what we have seen before.
Jeff says he has no idea how the object entered his leg. He remembers no incident that might have somehow allowed metal to become lodged in his body. There is no scar anywhere near the implant.
Are the other ones you've removed as close to the skin as this one?
No, they're usually closer to the bone. Initially, it could have been deep and then it come worked its way superficially.
Before we go into surgery to remove the implant, we need to determine what this object really is. We need to do a few series of tests of magnetism and radio frequency.
This is a 250-pound magnet, and with that we have quite a bit of magnetic force here. If this object will react to a magnetic field, it should pull it closer to the skin. Is this the spot here, Jeff?
Right there.
Right here, okay. Yeah, it does stand out a little bit. See the skin?
Yeah, I can. See, it's pulling out in just a small circular area, is that right?
Right.
How far out would you say that it's pulling out?
A good 1/8 of an inch.
Good 1/8 of an inch.
Now we're going to be testing for radioactivity, electromagnetic fields, and radio frequencies next.
Before we permanently remove this implant, we need to see if there's anything detectable going on. We do know that it's magnetic. Maybe it's giving off a radioactivity, maybe it's giving off a radio signal. We need to determine if it's just a piece of metal or it has some greater purpose.
This instrument is called a Gauss meter, and it's for the detection of electromagnetic fields. Let's see what happens. Okay. That noise is a very strong electromagnetic field. Let's get a reading of 10 milligauss, which is extremely strong.
It's highly unusual for a tiny speck of metal to give off such a strong signal, unless it's connected to a power source.
I wasn't that curious up until just now when you got a reading on output.
Now the next instrument we use is a radio frequency detector. We have two ranges here that we can change from. One is the gigahertz range and the other is the megahertz range.
Dr. Lear is sweeping a wide range of possible radio frequencies, from the bottom of the megahertz range and continuing upward to the top of the gigahertz range. Megahertz is the wavelength used by television and FM radio stations. Gigahertz is much higher, used for microwave ovens and cell phones, among other applications.
It is emitting a radio frequency. It looks to be like about 59.125254 gigahertz. This is the megahertz range now, which is a 35.893, and this is megahertz.
The megahertz reading fell under a VHF band. The VHF band is used by satellite radio and terrestrial communication, which is used by the government as well as the consumers.
Well, I think we've learned something today, and we'll wait for tomorrow to have it in our hand.
The evidence that we were able to test was pretty interesting, actually. We came out with a reading of 10 milligauss and also a radio frequency of 35 megahertz and 59 gigahertz.
35 megahertz is VHF, and that's radio, FM radio, or television. Good chance there's a lot of background radiation around. It might have picked that up. But the other one, 59 gigahertz, that's extremely high frequency. Those are the radio frequencies that radio astronomers use to detect radio frequencies coming in from outer space.
Why would an object under someone's skin be generating that kind of frequency? One is that the thing is sending a signal at a frequency that does travel pretty far. Two is that it's kind of also a homing beacon.
These readings are not particularly magnitude-wise very powerful, so it could be just part of the ambient environment in the space where you took your readings. It's pretty inconclusive until we can get that implant out and do some further testing.
So here we are, Jeff, at the surgical suite. The systems are all ready. The surgical suite is ready to go, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we pull out.
Before the operation, the medical team extracts blood from Jeff, so the object can be stored in the same fluid it was once immersed in.
Okay, you're all set.
All right, thank you.
Actually, the first part, I want everyone to back up a little because I really have to find this thing.
Dr. John Matriciano, a general surgeon practicing in Thousand Oaks, California, is conducting the operation.
There we see it.
There we go.
Finally. Yeah. Now I'm going to use the local anesthesia. Now we're going right to the spot we marked before. So we're going here. So I'll make a little nick with the skin. So I can't feel this, so I am going to rely a little bit on the x-ray. So we'll back off a little bit. Okay, I think we begin to see something here. Okay. Yeah. So look, a little bit of a black dot going there. Yep. Make sure we're on the same spot. I'm going to grasp this if I can.
Looks like you're on it.
Looks like we're right on it, so.
Are you gripping it hard? Try not to damage it.
No, it's slippery. I've got it here. See it?
Yeah, it's definitely solid.
Dr. Matriciano is surprised to find that Jeff's tissue has attached itself to the object.
It looked like it was encapsulated in organic material that was actually attached to Jeff's body. So there was a little bit of a tugging to get it out there.
That's it.
Yep.
We got it. Hold that for a second. That's it.
The size was surprising of the object. It appeared more flat and roundish, and I was really surprised that something of that size was generating a signal outside of my body.
So it's in the serum.
Okay.
I'm just curious to see what happens, like many are, now that it's out, what changes.
Yeah, the next step with this will be to get it to the lab to begin running our tests on it.
When the team has the implant analyzed,
there it is.
They discover something no one had ever expected.
It almost looks like a tiny meteorite.
Thank you, Roger.
After successfully removing an alleged alien implant from the leg of Jeff Harvey, the team conducts tests to determine if it still emits an unusual radio frequency as it did before.
Tell me about the radio frequency test.
The radio frequency actually canceled and stopped.
The implant is no longer emitting a signal.
Whether or not it's been turned off or been told not to work anymore or been grounded out, the frequencies of this type of object means there's much more implication to the object than what meets the eye.
Hey, Richard. I brought the sample that we discussed. You want to show us the optical microscope?
Sure. The next step is to analyze the object itself. Is it something that can be identified, or is it an anomalous object? The team takes the sample to Richard Mattson of SEAL Labs in El Segundo, California. With 36 years' experience, the company is one of the leading independent analysis laboratories in the country.
In order to take a scientific approach to this, we have to see actually what this thing is, submit it for metallurgical and biological testing, and see if we do have anything here.
The sample is pretty small. It's only about 1 to 2 millimeters across.
And what are you looking for at this point in time?
The geometry, the shape, the color, the surface features, surface texture. Just a good place to start. So it's irregular in shape. It looks like it's black and brown in color. It almost looks like a tiny meteorite.
Any fracture lines or?
No. It doesn't look man-made or manufactured. Under the optical microscope at 40x magnification, we got a great sense of what it looks like.
The object has two distinct areas, a light inner layer and a dark outer shell.
I do look at the outside surface, and it did appear to be blackened or charred, if you want to say.
You could be looking at rust. Yeah, it's true. Oxidation.
Yeah.
But a closer look reveals a third area, an unusual protrusion on the object.
It appears to be something that's dried, gel-like.
That we're calling the fin, because it kind of looks like a fin coming off the side. And I'm very curious to know, what's this made of? So this is a scanning electron microscope. Right here we have an electron source which shoots electrons down vertically at the sample. We can scan the sample in X and Y. We can get X-ray diffraction, which will give us the information about the elements that are in the sample.
It's a nice piece of equipment.
Yeah, it is. There it is. Can we get the X-ray off of this sort of fin-like material?
Sure.
I think we see here that it's not actually a material that's protruding from within the sample. It's actually something attached.
Right.
The spectra of that material, it's organic. So for some reason here, we've got a piece of the human body that's attached itself to the exterior surface of the sample. So this is really interesting because the human body has two kinds of reactions to a foreign object. One was the more extreme case where it would encapsulate it in pus and transport it out. And the second one was where it would just encase it and have a minor inflammatory reaction. It seems here that some material from the human body has actually attached itself to the sample, which to me doesn't seem like either of those cases that Dr. Laird described.
Usually it would reject it, but in this case it's actually embracing it.
Yeah, it's attached itself.
Very interesting.
Does it look like it's attached to the sample in any unusual way?
To me, it doesn't.
The team continues to analyze the object for other anomalies.
We're getting a good sense here of what the elements are within this edge. I see iron, oxygen, and carbon, and then
sulfur. As you can see, the highest peak is carbon.
The carbon and the oxygen he thought were contaminants.
All of these would be found in body fluids, for example.
But if we remove those, we're left with iron.
Iron.
So it looks like it's probably iron. Right. So we've just panned over to a third area of the sample, right? Where we thought it had that black coloration. There are our peaks.
Wow. They're coming up very similar. So the phosphorus is, there's more phosphorus in this area.
For now, I'm really not seeing anything too unusual. Basically, we have a small piece, about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, made of iron.
In fact, it is medically possible for foreign objects to migrate inside the body and emerge at points far from where they entered, sometimes years later.
My job as a scientist is just to look at the data and see if there's anything unusual, and in this case, there really isn't anything yet that has surprised us. My job is to rain on their parade, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to do that again.
Ted believes this implant is an iron pellet and that its emergence is a natural occurrence.
We could debate this case all night long and debate this case forever if you want to, but the fact is it was a traumatic event in his life. You took it to the lab, you ran your tests, and we found out that at least one test was very, very strange, that there was actual human tissue, protein, growing from within a fracture in the object itself.
You know, I know it was pretty exciting to have an opportunity to surgically remove what we thought might be some sort of foreign object or alien implant. As far as I can tell, after all of our scientific tests of it, it just looks like simply a small fragment of oxidized iron.
What about the tissue growing out of the metal? We just don't have that technology here on Earth, so therefore I say this is beyond our technology. It's quite possibly alien. We've taken technology and applied it to ufology. Rarely is that done in this field. The debunker will always say to you, you haven't proven the existence of a UFO, as if you've got to produce the UFO on the table for it to be true. But on the other hand, the ufologist will say, well, you haven't disproven the UFO. Show me something that says this is anything but a UFO. And you know what? We have not found one thing to disprove that there's an extraterrestrial presence affecting us on planet Earth, interfering with our lives, and traveling through our skies.
What began on a lonely New Hampshire highway in 1961, a couple allegedly chased down and abducted by aliens, continues to this day. Hundreds of news stories of alien abduction are reported every year, but the full accounts of what happens during these abductions may never be fully known. Are we really being watched by beings not of this world? Is it possible that other beings are leaving behind evidence of their visits to our planet? Or do these disturbing stories come not from the darkness of outer space, but from the dark corners of our own imagination?